You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network. This is Talking Headways, a weekly podcast about sustainable transportation and urban design. I'm Jeff Wood. This week we're joined by Dabney Sanders, project manager of the Greensboro Downtown Greenway. We chat about opening the final section of the Greenway after 25 years of work, the amazing art projects on the route, and lessons for other cities wanting to build greenways. Stay with us. Today's podcast is brought to you by our super amazing and kind Patreon supporters. We appreciate you all keeping this show and Mondays at the Overhead Wire going. To join this merry band of bus riders, bus drivers, and chupistas, go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month gets you some stickers and a handwritten note sent with a cool train station stamp. $10 a month gets you one of our transportation scarves. And if you want to just give a single $1 a month, you'll be able to get the podcast with 0 outside ads or podcast recommendations in Patreon. We'll leave information in the show notes about how to get the show in your podcatcher. We'll also recently put up some bonus material, including audio of my first ever e-bike ride, and have a weekly free post from our newsletter intro, so check it out if you haven't already. And speaking of scarves, get your heavyweight bus and bike scarves. You'll definitely need one for you, your friends, your colleagues, just to show everyone in that city hall or legislature your advocacy in clothing that won't get taken by security on the way in. If you want to get one of the bus or bike scarves or the lightweight bike scarf for hot climates, visit theoverheadwire.com or support us on Patreon. But there are many other ways to support the show, including buying books from us on the bookshop site, either the books from our authors that we interview or any book you like. bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. And find our Cars Are Cholesterol merch at bit.ly/carsarecholesterol. And for anything else, including the Town Planning and Practice audiobook that plays like a podcast, visit theoverheadwire.com. You can also get that podcast from Libby at your public library. And finally, definitely sign up for the 20-year-old newsletter we do at theoverheadwire.com, established in 2006, and our over 110,000 item link archive tagged by topic and city. We'll leave a YouTube explainer video in the show notes as well for that one too. Or you can just keep listening and enjoying the show. We appreciate that as well. You can find us mostly on Blue Sky and Mastodon, sometimes on Threads, Instagram, Flickr, YouTube, Substack, and LinkedIn if you want to connect, usually at the Overhead Wire, but with Flickr, it's Transit Nerds. We've got some great stuff coming up for you in our 13th year of the podcast, so keep on listening for announcements on gatherings, but for now, just enjoy the show. Hey everybody, I decided to move this part of my thank yous up from the post-credits to right here smack dab at the start because I do want to recognize the folks who are Dallas tier or higher Patreon supporters. It really helps us out and we super appreciate it. When I get new supporters, I'll update this section, so I hope that happens often. So first names only, but big thanks to Andrew, Ben, Derek, Gabriel, Glenn, Greg, James, Jeremy, Jim, Joseph, Catherine, Mal, Marcus, Matthew, Mike, Nicholas, Abraham, Oliver, Steve, Abby, Matthew, Sylvia, and recently added Andrew A. All right, thank you all very much. Let's get to the show. Well, Dabney Sanders, welcome to the Talking Headways podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm Dabney Sanders, and I'm the project manager for the Downtown Greenway in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Awesome. Did you come to this idea of greenways and cities and transportation policy recently, or was it when you were a little kid, or how did you get involved in this type of idea and thinking?
Well, I actually don't really have any training in urban planning or greenways or transportation, but I got involved in an organization, Action Greensboro, that was formed by 6 local foundations here in 2000. And they were thinking about things that collectively they could do to help ensure that Greensboro continued to be a wonderful, vibrant, great city, even though we were experiencing some changes in our economy at that time. And I did some volunteer work for them and then started doing some consulting for them and just kind of eased into this project. But I will say I was really intrigued by the idea of this downtown greenway because I had grown up in Rhode Island and we had an old rail trail that was converted into a greenway called the East Bay Greenway. And it was just such an amazing facility that I enjoyed personally. And I was kind of excited about the opportunity of bringing something like that to our community here in Greensboro.
That's awesome. And it was part of a larger plan. Well, first off, actually, I should ask you, like, can you tell me a little bit about Greensboro? I'm curious about the community and kind of the makeup of the city and the history and things
Sure.
like that.
Well, Greensboro is a great community in North Carolina. We're sort of located in the center part of the state. We're the third largest city in North Carolina. And we traditionally, have had a big manufacturing base, textiles, cigarettes, furniture, big industries for us here in Greensboro historically. And as those industries have changed, we now are changing as well and are doing a lot in the aerospace industry now, which is kind of exciting. And we are really thinking about these kinds of placemaking amenities that will attract people who want to live and work here so that we can support that workforce that we need moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell me about the planning process for we'll talk about the Greenway in a second, but just like the background for planning and what people were thinking in the 2000s and where this came about?
Well, the Greensboro had quite a few philanthropic foundations, some private foundations and a community foundation here and a healthcare conversion foundation. And they were working kind of in their own spaces. And there was a report commissioned from McKinsey and Company that was kind of projecting what things might look like if really nothing changed. And that trajectory was heading in a direction that we were not happy with. And so the foundations decided it was really worthwhile for them to come together and think about a couple of things. One, pooling all of those resources from the foundations to really put some money behind some ideas. But they also wanted to take a grassroots approach rather than a top-down approach. And so they did a lot of community engagement and were asking the community to think about what are the things that you love about Greensboro? What are our strengths? What are the things that we should try to build upon and support? And then also, of course, getting people to think about some of the challenges that we were facing. And so from all of that community engagement, Action Greensboro sort of developed a plan based on that community feedback of how some initiatives and some efforts that we ought to work towards in order to keep our community vibrant. And one of the things that came out of that was this idea of having a very strong center city being important, a strong downtown being important to the entire community. And so a master plan for Center City was commissioned, and it was in that master plan that came out in 2001 that the Downtown Greenway was envisioned as a key part of that master plan.
How much of I'm curious, like how much of the rest of the master plan, you've worked so hard on this one part of it, how much of the rest of it has come to fruition?
So actually, surprisingly, quite a bit has come to fruition. There were 3 major, very physical infrastructure projects that were recommended. One of those was building a park in our center city. We really did not have a large green open public space. And we now have a park called Center City Park that was built and opened in 2006. And then the other idea, we had a minor league baseball team and stadium that was located just kind of on the northeast corner of our downtown. And it was an aging facility, and the master plan called for that baseball stadium to be moved into the heart of downtown. And that also was done. Both of those projects were done 100% with private funding to make that happen. And both of those projects have had an incredible impact on our community. And the Downtown Greenway was sort of the third leg, probably the most complicated of those infrastructure projects. And we're excited that we are finishing that up as well.
Yeah, you're coming up on a milestone, which is the final section will be declared open. So that's pretty exciting, right?
It's super exciting. This has been a project that is 25 years in the making, an incredible public-private partnership. The foundations that support Action Greensboro really drove the project in the early days. And of course, we knew that for this project to be successful, we needed a very strong partnership with the city of Greensboro, and that was established. And after 25 years, it feels really good to be getting the 4 miles open.
Are you wondering what you're going to do with your weekends? Like,
I'm going to be out enjoying the downtown Greenway with everybody else.
I heard you give good golf cart tours.
Yes, we used to do golf cart tours. Unfortunately, we could not get our insurance renewed.
Oh, no.
For that. And so we've had to stop doing those, but we do a wonderful walking tour that honestly I think is even better because you're just right there on the ground and getting a little exercise at the same time.
Yeah. So tell me about kind of the physical features of the Greenway, the distance and kind of the layout and what it connects.
So the Downtown Greenway is a 4-mile paved multi-use trail, and our standard width is 12 feet wide. And then we have an amenity zone kind of on either side of that varies in width, but at a minimum is 5 feet. And in some cases, it's a little bit wider if we have a wider section of right-of-way. It's paved in both asphalt and concrete, sort of depending on where it is. And it serves a lot of different purposes for us here in Greensboro. It certainly defines downtown Greensboro. It's a very physical structure that defines our downtown. It kind of expands the perceived footprint of downtown as well, because in Greensboro, we have a very strong main street that is called Elm Street. And east and west of that, a few blocks, we have a pretty strong center. But then if you got 4 and 5 blocks out, we had a lot of either surface parking lots or empty land that was ripe for development. And we felt that by building this downtown Greenway as that definer of downtown, it would also attract other private development to come in and around it. And that has happened. So the idea of defining downtown Greensboro, expanding the perceived footprint, it serves as the central hub of our entire greenways and trails system in our community. We connect 8 different neighborhoods directly through this downtown Greenway. And it's very much a transportation facility as well as a recreation facility.
It's kind of like the Chicago Loop, right? Like brings people into the center of the city. I was looking on the Google Maps and I saw one of the trails went out to Markland Drive, and there's a number of them you can follow from outside of the outskirts of town into the center, which is really a fascinating part of this as well.
It is. And that's an incredibly important connection that you just mentioned, because we have a greenway called the A&Y Greenway, the Atlantic and Yadkin Greenway, that is probably Greensboro's most used greenway. And it begins, I would say, about 3 miles outside of downtown, 2 to 3 miles. And so what the downtown Greenway is doing is serving as this hub. The city is actually working on a little gap in that trail system of about 2 miles that will connect the downtown Greenway to that A&Y Greenway. And if you get on the A&Y Greenway, you continue heading north, you end up running into the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is a very important trail across the state of North Carolina from Murphy to Manteo. And if you get on the Mountains to Sea Trail and head east to Durham, North Carolina, you connect up with the East Coast Greenway. And that is a 3,000-mile greenway that is running from Maine to Florida. About 1,200 miles of that greenway has been completed, and the East Coast Greenway Alliance is working very hard and hopes within the next 10 to 12 years to have that full 3,000 miles connected. But you can imagine once our connection happens, you are then connected to this much larger, important system. And we think that will do a lot for bicycle tourism here in Greensboro, both helping people in Greensboro get out and explore, but also bringing people into our city.
Somebody needs to make like a transit type map of all of the greenways on the East Coast and like how they connect. And that would be really cool, kind of see all those together. Is the Greenway different now than when it was envisioned in terms of like what changed along the way, or processes that might have been different? I mean, 25 years is quite a bit of time. And so I imagine some things have maybe not quite the same as they were when they were started out.
Sure. Well, in the Cooper Carey Center for Connective Architecture out of Atlanta they did the original master plan for Center City, and they did the original kind of basic planning of the downtown Greenway. And I have to say that we have stuck very close to their original vision. It was just an amazing vision that they set out for us. There were some changes. They had set the route out, and we had to make some adjustments in a couple of sections because either we didn't have the right of way that we had expected, or there was another challenge in that way. But for the most part, we were able to keep the rough framework of encircling downtown Greensboro. And they had also been the ones that had recommended this idea of including public art as a part of what we do. And they had some kind of general ideas. They had suggested that Greensboro has some really interesting and important stories to tell, our textile industry story, and we have quite a civil rights history story here. And they thought it was an opportunity for us to share those stories. And so we basically took their idea, and then of course got a little more specific and detailed as we were thinking about really getting it on the ground. And we found that to be incredibly effective of telling the stories, not only those broader stories, but as an example, we also have neighborhood benches that we commission North Carolina artists to produce for us that represent each of those 8 neighborhoods that we pass through. And it has proven to be something that the community has really responded to. And we feel that that aspect of the downtown Greenway sort of sets us apart from some other greenways, particularly in this area. We had a tagline in the early days that we said, bringing us together and setting us apart. And we really feel like that sort of encapsulates what this downtown Greenway is doing for our community.
How did you go about commissioning artists to work on some of these projects? You have benches, bike racks, murals, art under the railroad tracks. There's a really cool purple doors under there that I saw.
Yes.
How did you commission the arts for that?
So we have a public art selection panel that we put together, and that consists of some art professionals locally, as well as some community members and members of the city staff who particularly help us think about safety and maintenance issues. Barbara Peck has led our public art selection panel since 2008. So she's been in it for the long haul as well. And for each of our pieces, we will craft and send out a call to artists. And then that art selection panel will review those calls. We will narrow down to a list of finalists that we interview. In many cases, we'll do a Zoom interview with, let's say, 6 or 7 candidates, and then we'll pick the final 2 or 3 people that we're really interested in, and we actually bring them to Greensboro. We found over the years that it really makes a big difference when you can have somebody and share a meal with them and have some social time as well as that pure sort of interview time. We really get to know the artists, and it gives us a sense, are these folks that we feel like we can work with and will be a good fit for our community. And then that art selection panel votes and selects the finalist who gets the commission. And then they also help sort of shepherd that process through as that artist is doing their community engagement work here to inform their piece. And of course, all through the design and ultimately the installation.
Is there a plan for continuing additions to the art that's already on the trail?
We've been talking about that as part of our sort of transitioning, because as we finish this downtown Greenway, the role that Action Greensboro has played is really coming to an end, because my role as project manager has been to see this project through and get it finished. And so we are transitioning to the city of Greensboro having full maintenance and ownership and operational responsibilities for the downtown Greenway. And we have a memorandum of understanding and kind of a vision for things that the city ought to think about. And one of those is being open to those opportunities that might present themselves in the future for public art.
That's awesome. Yeah, we just had Stephanie Dockery of Bloomberg Philanthropies on last week, talking about their public art challenge. And a lot of the art they've commissioned is they're short-term pieces, so they're not permanent, but they're, with transit buses or with public art underneath highways or along corridors or things like that. And it's really fascinating to see kind of this idea of the art growing, and also how it kind of influences the neighborhoods around it and the people in the city, the changes that happen. So I imagine something similar is happening in Greensboro, where you guys put out some art that local artists have created, and there's a conversation, or maybe somebody is new to the scene and gets famous and becomes a part of the community in that way. So I think that's interesting too.
Yeah, and we've had a great experience with using both local as well as regional and national artists. We commissioned one of our very first large pieces, Gateway of the Open Book. We commissioned Brower Hatcher, who was from Providence, Rhode Island, and Brower had really quite a career in public art. Looking back on it, I feel very lucky that Brower was the artist we selected, because he was so knowledgeable and so good at his craft that we were kind of new to it. We didn't know as much as we do now, of course, 25 years later. And he really did an amazing job sort of setting the bar there. But we had a little bit of criticism in the beginning that why had we selected this national artist instead of picking a local artist? And what Brower did when he got here, we were making a lot of community connections for him. And he met a local artist that he just really hit it off with. And he ended up commissioning that local artist to help him with the project. And we heard later that they had developed such a rapport working with each other that Brower then took him, our local artist from Greensboro, and had him work on a project of his in California. And that would have been an opportunity that this local artist probably would not have had on his own. And we just love that it was such a positive experience for both of them.
That's so awesome. I love that. Mentorships are really important. Mm-hmm. One big item you can see from the aerial photos is the Freedom Cornerstone. I noticed that there's a big, if you look from above, you can see that space there. Can you tell us a little bit about that piece specifically?
Yes. So the Freedom Cornerstone sits in our southeast corner of the downtown Greenway. And the idea of that theme of freedom was looking at the role that Greensboro played in the national civil rights movement with our local sit-in movement that happened here. And also, Greensboro had a very strong presence with the Underground Railroad. And we were really pleased. Again, we did a national call for artists as well as a call to local artists for that piece. And Radcliffe Bailey really rose to the top. I have to say, we were a little surprised that Radcliffe made an application for this piece, because he was just working on a level at which, I wouldn't have imagined that our budget would have been something he would have wanted to work with. But he was very intrigued by that topic. Radcliffe's father had been a railroad engineer. And so Radcliffe, his work typically dealt with African American history and culture. And his work often will have a railroad theme somehow embedded in the work. And so we were really pleased to commission Radcliffe to do that piece. And what he envisioned with that, he actually we had a little bit larger site at that Freedom Cornerstone. We had done some major roadway work there to make the intersection safer and to get the Greenway in. And so we had some excess right of way that Radcliffe could use. And he took an image of a Dogon ladder from the Mali people and on the western coast of Africa. And he kind of overlaid that Dogon ladder. And that's sort of the framework of the pathways that run through that Freedom Cornerstone site that you would see from overhead. And then the piece that he created, the major piece, which is called Ascension, has quite a large concrete base that is in the shape of the hull of a ship that's been dry docked. And so that's referencing Middle Passage. And on top of that is a metal structure that you can interpret as a railroad track. It looks like a railroad track. And of course, that is another sort of historic divide between Black and white communities. And but you can and also a reference to that Underground Railroad. But then you can also look at that structure and interpret it not as a railroad track, but as a ladder, and start thinking about people sort of ascending beyond their circumstances. And on the top of that metal structure is a neon star, a blue that's lit at night. It's blue, and that's referencing the North Star. And of course, if you were traveling on the Underground Railroad, you'd be traveling at night under dark. And so you would use that North Star as a guide to be sure that you were continuing to head in the right direction towards freedom and safety. And I loved what Radcliffe shared when he had the idea of that neon star. We had done our community engagement meetings with Radcliffe in a nearby historic site called the Historic Magnolia House, which was a Green Book site listed in 6 different editions of the Green Book. And has been beautifully restored, and it's a really nice place to have a meeting. So we held those community meetings. And the owner, Natalie Pass Miller, was giving Radcliffe kind of a behind the scenes tour. And they went into the basement, and there was an old kind of broken down neon sign that had been the original sign for the historic Magnolia House. And so that kind of triggered to him, oh, that would be sort of a cool idea to do a neon sign. And then, of course, thinking about that North Star.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I was also interested, I think I read another interview that you did that corridor, the north-south corridor, was going to be a highway, and then that divided the Black neighborhoods from the white ones. And we've seen this happen in so many cities around the United States back in the 60s and 70s, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that it's interesting that it didn't happen, but also that this piece of art that, symbolizes so much, is right on that corridor as well.
Yes, well, it is interesting. Part of that highway was actually built, and the Downtown Greenway runs right along the edge of that. It's called Murrow Boulevard, and it was intended to be a vehicular bypass around downtown Greensboro, and the east side was built first. And the east side of Greensboro is our historically African American part of town. And as you say, lots of communities were building these highways through their towns to make that separation. So we did have that same experience in Greensboro in the late 60s, early 70s. And I guess the good thing was that that highway didn't extend further into another African-American neighborhood called Old Ashboro. There was some neighborhood opposition to that, and the rest of that highway system was never built. So we were able to actually take some excess right-of-way from that overbuilt roadway and create it's actually a much safer environment for vehicles. And it also, of course, allowed us to create this very nice environment for pedestrians and cyclists as well.
What's your favorite use of the Greenway so far?
Well, that's a little hard to answer. I can say selfishly, I walk to and from work every day, and I use the Downtown Greenway as part of my walk. I live in a historic neighborhood just on the north edge of downtown Greensboro. So that's one of my favorite parts, is actually being able to experience it as I walk to work. It's really wonderful hearing stories of how other people are using it. We have been hearing of families who are using the Downtown Greenway, riding their bikes to take their kid to school. We know that people and families are getting together with friends and using it either to maybe go downtown to a restaurant or a bar. We have a lot of run clubs, and we have some cycle clubs that use the Downtown Greenway regularly for that. So I love the fact that the community is embracing it in a lot of different ways.
I always ask people about favorites, and it's always a hard to like pull it out because people are there's so many different things that you can use it for. I'm wondering also how the Greenway acts as green infrastructure as well. There was some mentions of bioswales and other infrastructure things that could help with stormwater runoff and that type of thing.
Yeah, we do have quite a focus on sustainability with the Downtown Greenway. We recognize that building this kind of facility in a very urban environment gave us a real opportunity to make a difference in that way. And we worked with a design firm that really had a specialty in stormwater management. We were intrigued by that. So we have installed the first innovative stormwater treatment facilities on a roadside that were ever done in Greensboro. And we wanted to, these tree wells that basically are capturing water instead of the water running down the street, down the gutter, going straight into the storm drain system. These tree wells encourage that water to actually flow into the tree well. And there's a highly specialized soil that's designed for drainage. And that water begins to get some filtration just through the natural microbes that are in the soil. And then, of course, as that water dissipates, it's just dissipating down into the groundwater system. So you have less unfiltered water that's going into the storm drain system. And again, because of this public-private partnership, we felt this was probably something that the city, I don't think, would have done on their own. It had never been done in Greensboro. And we thought, why don't we use our Downtown Greenway project as an example, kind of a little pilot project to show how effective they can be. And of course, they're beautiful as well. If you think about that area, I think some communities call it the verge, which is that area between either a sidewalk or, in our case, the Downtown Greenway and the roadway, that little strip of grass there. Often it's just a strip of grass. And with these tree wells, we have a much wider space, and it gives us the opportunity to plant trees and other shrubs there. So you have this beautiful environment, as well as an environment that is environmentally friendly and sustainable. Of course, we won't see those direct effects right away. It's kind of a longer term vision for that. But in addition to the tree wells, we have one section that has solar powered lighting. It was the first solar powered lighting that Greensboro had installed. We have lots of pollinator gardens as well. We started out with one and had such great community feedback to that. And the more we thought about these various pockets of gardens that go along the Downtown Greenway, we thought creating these little pollinator coordinators, again, in this very urban environment, would be something nice to do.
You mentioned the right-of-way. I'm curious also, like, how hard was it to collect some of these pieces, to accumulate them, to make sure that the whole Greenway was connected? Obviously, part of it is in a kind of a trail section where it's off on its own, but then other parts seem to be next to that road that you talked about, and then others seem to be parts of sidewalks almost.
Exactly. So I think we had two opportunities in Greensboro when that first idea was presented of the rough route that it might take, that actually, to be honest, made us think this was possible to do in a way that maybe some cities wouldn't be able to do. If you had to purchase all of the right-of-way for this in your center city, the cost probably would be prohibitive. But in our case, we had that divided highway that you and I were talking about earlier, Murray Boulevard, which was a 6-lane divided highway, did not carry a lot of traffic on it. We knew we could take at least a full lane of traffic out of that to convert. So we did not have to do right-of-way purchasing for that because the city owned it. That's on our east side. On the west side, we had a railroad corridor that had one commercial user using that line. And we had the sense that maybe we could convince that commercial user not to use it any longer, and we could do a rail to trail conversion on that line. I will say we were successful with that. We did have to pay for that. We were naive in the beginning, thinking that the railroad might just abandon it, but that's not how it works.
They never give up for free. Usually, it's
exactly
across the country.
Exactly. So I will say we did not have to do as much right-of-way acquisition as you might imagine. It was more kind of little bits and pieces that we might need here and there. There were a few properties. One of the properties for one of our cornerstones in the northwest corner, our tradition cornerstone, had been a gas station and a convenience store. And we just knew, being right there in the corner where it was, that we wanted that property, and we're lucky enough to be able to purchase that. So we had a lot of cooperation, uh, even from some private property owners. On the northern section, we had very tight right of way. We had just not even quite what we needed. And we had a property owner who really believed in the project. And when we approached them about needing additional right of way of their property, they actually donated the right of way instead of asking for that compensation, because they knew what this project could do for our community. And they also knew that ultimately this project would increase their own property values. And so I feel very fortunate that we were able to acquire the right of way that we needed in a way that wasn't particularly painful outside of the railroad negotiations.
Was there anybody that pushed back on it? Was there anybody that was like, I don't know about this having a trail that goes through my property or near my property or anything along those lines?
We had this final section, the Western Branch section, was really the first section in which the Downtown Greenway is directly adjacent to residential backyards. And we did have a lot of meetings with those residents to talk about the vision, talk about their concerns. Of course, this had been an abandoned railroad corridor. So what we were talking about doing was an incredible improvement to what had been there. But people did have concerns about, oh, are people going to be, are we going to have people walking up into our backyards and that sort of thing? And we did work with those residents. We offered to build a fence along all of those backyards, and we offered to put gates in those fences at our expense that the property owners would control so that they would have access, because people were very excited about the Greenway happening. They just wanted to make sure that they had some protections of their property. And there were probably 16 or so residents, and of those, all but one of those residents requested that gate. And we took that as a real sign of people appreciating the project.
What was the political support like throughout the project? Did it wax and wane with different mayoral administrations, or was it just continuous support for the project?
I would say that we had pretty continuous support for the project from the early days. And we have had quite a few changes in our mayor and our city manager and, of course, city council members. This Downtown Greenway connects or goes through 4 of our 5 city council districts. So in a way, that was a very nice thing, because we had a lot of buy-in from people who had a direct interest. Their part of their district was a part of the Downtown Greenway. So we've been very fortunate that we've had really good support from not only our elected leaders through our city council over these years, but also from our city staff and our city manager's office. We've worked with, I feel like almost every single department within the city in some way over the years with this project. And the city staff has been really incredible to work with. I will say in the early days, as I mentioned, this idea for the Downtown Greenway was driven by the private sector, by Action Greensboro. And I don't know that the city staff loved the idea at the beginning, but as the private sector put money into it, and we did all this due diligence, and we began to see how the community was responding to it, the city staff really came along. And of course, over these years, the interest in bike ped infrastructure has only continued to grow. I would say we were kind of a front runner in that. We did it pretty early on when it wasn't, greenways weren't totally the hot thing that they are today.
Is there anything you do differently?
Let's see. The foundations that support Action Greensboro would say this. They sort of went out and commissioned this master plan and kind of started the early planning of the Greenway on their own and didn't have that public-private partnership in the super early days. That really came in 2008 when we had a first bond referendum locally that put local public money into the project to join that private money that had already been raised. And I think in hindsight, it would have been nice to have sort of gone and really had that partnership from almost from day one. I think that it's always nice to have more funding. I mean, this was a big project, and I feel very proud of the private money that was put into the project, over $14 million. I also feel really proud of the city of Greensboro because they not only were willing to put 2 bond referendums locally to dedicate money to this project, but they also used that local money to leverage money from the state, from NCDOT, and then also leveraged money from the federal government. We have some federal highway funds that we have used. And it's really nice to have, for a project of this size, for a city the size of Greensboro, to have that money from outside the community makes a big difference. But there are things that I wish that, it'd be nice to have a few more $1 million to really do some additional things that would make it even better than it is already.
What do you think the long-term impact will be of the Greenway?
I think long-term, it's very interesting. We've had 3 miles of this open for the last couple of years, and this final mile has been under construction for the last two and a half years. And we're seeing, as more and more people are using that final mile, which is a really beautiful section that has a stream that runs alongside of it, we're seeing ripple effects from people using that final section so that we have even more usage on the other sections that have been open. And I can really envision long-term this being just an integral part of people's lives. I hope that we will see more people walking and cycling places and not quite so car dependent. We have a lot of people who don't think twice about driving a mile to get someplace when it would be very easy to either bike or to walk to that same place. So I hope we'll have that kind of impact. And I also imagine that, and I know that we have been an inspiration to other communities. We visited some other greenways when we were in our early stages to get ideas of what we might think about, and talk to communities about challenges and opportunities we should consider. And we get calls on a very, very regular basis from other communities that want to know how we did it. And I think that those other communities, I hope, will have some success from either being inspired by our work or learning directly from the work that we've done, so that we see these kind of projects happening in other communities as well.
I should have asked you this earlier. You mentioned if you wish you had a couple extra $1 million, what would you use it for?
I think we have some other opportunities for public art. We have some opportunities, for additional landscaping. I will say we raised privately some money for an endowment, a maintenance endowment, because we knew we were putting this public art. We have almost 50 works of public art on the Greenway that are a little above and beyond maybe what a typical city facility might have. And so we raised privately an initial $1 million. That endowment has now grown to a little over 1.8 million. It'd be really nice to even bump that number up because, of course, as the years go on, there are going to be some maintenance issues. Murals don't have a permanent lifespan. And we know over time, some of the other public art will need some maintenance. And it would be wonderful to have that kind of backstop of steady income that could help support that.
Any advice for other communities? You mentioned the communities come and ask you questions all the time, but any specific advice for other communities who might want to do something similar?
Well, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the public-private partnership and really working to make that successful, developing those strong relationships with not only elected leaders, but with city staff, and having the private sector understand and appreciate what the public sector is bringing to the table, and vice versa. I think that really has been responsible, I think, for our success, is that good public private partnership. I would also encourage people to be persistent and stay positive and focused. Sometimes it's 25 years is a long time to have an initial vision and then have it come to fruition. But we know that this is a project that is going to have incredibly long-lasting impacts on this community, not just for residents in a very direct way who are using it and enjoying it, but also the economic development and impact that comes, in I'm going to be excited in 10 years to see the new apartment complexes and the new maybe civic structures and maybe an office building and some retail that pops up along the downtown Greenway to support and enhance what we already have. I think we'll see some real dramatic changes over the next 5 to 10 years in that way.
The Greenway circles around the downtown you mentioned. There's a couple main streets and stuff. How does it connect to that from a transportation standpoint? Are there bike lanes that go into the center, or other ways that makes it easily connected to the rest of the downtown?
Yes. So in terms of from kind of the outside in, I will say that the downtown Greenway serves as the central hub of our trail system. So there are quite a few connecting trails that come into the downtown Greenway. And we spent a lot of time talking to residents about, from your neighborhood, are there any barriers to connection that we can help improve? And we've done some of that. In terms of looking at the downtown Greenway and inside, it's interesting you asked, because I just was having a conversation with somebody that works in our transportation department. And he was saying, we really need to look at some of these important connections and do an evaluation of sidewalks and street lighting and, make sure that we are providing those. I'm a big proponent of planting trees whenever possible in our southern environment. To me, that's one of the hardest things, is for commuting to work. I love doing it in the spring, fall, and winter. I really don't like doing it so much in the summer. And so our transportation staff is now really thinking about the importance of looking at those connectors. What can make some existing things like sidewalks an appropriate and a meaningful place for people to use from the downtown Greenway, connecting to places that they want to visit downtown.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Where can folks find out more about the Greenway?
So we have a wonderful website at downtowngreenway.org, and we have an interactive map on that website that you can filter various things. So if you're interested in finding out where the public art is, or you want to know where a bench is, or we have bike fix-it stations, you can filter to find out where those are if something happens to you on your bike or happens to your bike. And it also, on our website, has a very nice description of all of those works of public art that I mentioned, with photographs and who the artist is and a little detail about the inspiration behind the art. So the Downtown Greenway website at downtowngreenway.org is a wonderful resource. The other thing I'll say is that we have an audio guide, and this is an audio guide that a company called Otocast, Otocast, did for us. And they have audio guides, in other places across the country. So it's an app that you can download on your phone for free. There's also a desktop version. And what I love about it is it has all these points of interest on the downtown Greenway. And if you're on your phone, as you're walking on the Greenway, as you approach a piece, you have a couple of ways to access information. There's some photographs on the app. There's text on the app. And then there is an audio component that talks to you about what you're seeing. And in many, many cases, we were able to record the voices of the artists who had created the work. So you're hearing about the work in the artist's own voice. And it's just a really nice way to experience it. It's like having a docent along with you on the tour, but it's self-guided. And again, you can access that through your phone and use it while you're actively walking. Or if you're sitting at home and you want to have a virtual walk, you can access it from our website as well.
Awesome. And where can folks find you if you wish to be found?
From now through June 30th, you can find me in my office at Action Greensboro. I'm happy for people to email me if they have questions, if they've heard this podcast and want to ask more. And my email is dsanders, so DSANDERS at actiongreensboro.org.
Awesome. Well, Dabney, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
And thanks for joining us. The Talking Headways podcast is a project of The Overhead Wire, published first at Streetsblog USA. Thanks to our wonderful Patreon supporters for sponsoring this week's show and Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Find us at patreon.com/theoverheadwire. You can sign up for our 20-year-old newsletter as well and find everything else, including multiple ways to support the show, at theoverheadwire.com. You can also listen to our show on your podcatcher of choice, including Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. And if you can't find it there, you can always find its original home at usa.streetsblog.org. We'll see you next time at Talking Headways.